Question, Father Peter or Cleave can answer this one. I want to convert to Orthodoxy, but my problem is for some reason I feel drawn to convert to Roman Catholicism. So what should I do? I mean, that's easy. Become Orthodox. There you go.
So again, it would be great if you gave us more particulars. What is it drawing you? Do you know, is there something in particular that's drawing you? Is it, how would you describe it? I mean, that would be my first question if I was sitting in front of him. Okay, describe it for me. Is it some kind of security that maybe the papacy supposedly brings? I've heard people say that. I feel like there's a rock, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so the Orthodoxy seems like it's more of a, you know, free for all or whatever. I don't know what impression people have depending on their experience and how far they've gone into Orthodoxy. So it would depend, but there's no comparison. I've done a number of live streams on Catholicism. If you can check them out on Orthodox Ethos, I did a very extensive, I mean, and we published the Heirs of the Latins, this 2-volume massive tome all about the massive changes that happened in Catholicism right after the schism. It's phenomenal. The history witnesses to which church, it's very obvious once you get the historical data, which church is the same church as the first millennium. And you don't have to, and I think almost I'm kind of tired of this discussion always focusing on the papacy. That's what the papist apologists want. They want us to focus only on this argument around the place of the Pope. But there's many other factors that point to the truth of Orthodoxy in the life of Catholicism in the West. And you had massive changes right after the schism. We're Orthodoxy, you don't. And their apologists tell you that we've never changed. They tell you that we're the same church of the first millennium, whereas we respond and say, you're not the church of the first millennium. And here's all these examples of massive changes in your life, not just the question of the papacy, which is always the debate. And not only do we say that, but we point to Roman Catholic apologists and fathers of the Second Vatican Council who say everything changed in the West in the 12th, 11th, and 12th centuries. That's Yves Congar. In our live stream, we presented his book, After 900 Years, where he talks about, this is the great famous quote, and I always tell this to Roman Catholics, Yves Congar, the father of Vatican II, all right? He's almost like a legend among Roman Catholic academic theologians. He says in his book, if you were a Christian in the 4th, 5th, 6th century, and you went to a church in the West, this is in the West, you went to a church in the 9th century, or even the 10th century, you would say, yeah, it's pretty familiar. If you were a Christian in the 9th century and you went to a church in the West in the 12th century, you would say, where am I? That's Congar talking, not the Orthodox. He recognizes massive changes, and it's very obvious in art, in ascetic life and how they understand the ascetic life, in their theology, the whole question of academic / scholastic theology and not being grounded in the ascetic life as in the first millennium, and many other things. Not just dogma like the Filioque, but in the life of the Western Christians. So that's far more, to me, that's far more of a witness against the continuity of Catholicism than any debate around the papacy, although that also is very obvious to us. If you look at the Eighth Ecumenical Council we just released this morning for public consumption, the talk by Father Anastasio Kotsopoulos, showing that at the Eighth Ecumenical Council, in other words, the council under Photios in 879, that the papacy as they presented in the second millennium is non-existent. It does not exist in the acts of the Eighth Ecumenical Council. There is no overarching Vatican I papacy anywhere in the Council of 879. So just 150 years before, you have a massive change in the 11th century from the 9th century with regard to the papacy. Yeah. So as far as like the arguments, which I think it's not enough. I think you have to have experience of Orthodoxy. You have to have experience of and follow the saints in the way of life. But as far as the arguments go, it's not hard. If you spend the right time, you read the right material, the source material, to see that the church that is the same yesterday, today, and forever is only the Orthodox Church.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, especially in the West, the historical arguments, absolutely. But I think because of media, because of the way that media has portrayed Roman Catholicism as this kind of, well, this is like the Western history. This is the modern Roman Catholic Church is like Western history. So to be Western is to be, maybe somehow affiliated with this if you're going to try to be somehow.
So it's the cultural question of being Western. You're saying,
right,
is what's drawing him probably.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But I had a good conversation with DPH not that long ago, who was at the conference, and we were talking about Orthodoxy, the way that we worship. This is common to West and East in the first millennium. If you were to go back and look at the churches and the way that they worship during this time in the early church, it is just about exactly the way that the Orthodox worship today. I mean, even if you were to look at the way that the churches looked in Rome, I mean, look at the catacomb churches that we have uncovered in recent archaeology. I mean, they have the domes. They have it's the same exact archaeological style. Even liturgically, it's just about the same as what we do today. So if you were to take an Orthodox worship, liturgical worship service today, divine liturgy, and then you were to somehow hop in a time machine and go back to a church in the West in the first millennium, especially very early on, it would look exactly the same as what we do today.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this is something that's common to the West and the East. And we need to think about, I want to do what my ancestors did. Well, do your ancestors when? Your ancestors shortly after the time of the apostles in the West, or the modern innovations that the media shows you and tries to tell you your lineage?
Yeah, if Congar can say that between the 9th and the 12th century it was night and day, what would we say between the 9th and the 21st century or the 20th century, post-Vatican II? I make the point in my book, I think in some of my essays, that Vatican II was the victory of the Reformation. Like 500 years later, the Protestants won. They did a hard left at Vatican II, both in terms of their innovations and changes in terms of their liturgics, but also in terms of their ecclesiology. They abandoned the exclusive ecclesiology that they had all throughout the Middle Ages, and they embraced the ecumenistic, which is really Protestant. The ecumenism, modern ecumenism, is, as I write in one of my books, The Missionary Origins of Modern Ecumenism, a little book, if you want to know the history of ecumenism, it's in the mission field, in the Protestant mission field. That's where it all begins. It's where the Methodists and the Anglicans and the various other Protestants are in Africa, and they're trying to missionize the tribes, and the tribes turn and say, well, which Christian should I become? And they were like, well, we're all just the same, really. But they're like, no, you're not. And so then they turn around and they go back to Edinburgh and they go back to London and they say, we've got to do something. We've got to come together because we're not able to do the mission like we should be doing the mission. And they're pushing the leadership in the late 19th century. And they are the founders of the modern World Council of Churches eventually. Like, these people are the ones who shaped it. And Vatican II comes and follows that. You see, Vatican II is a capitulation to Protestantism. So it's on many levels, Catholicism is a departure not just from the 9th to the 12th, but from the 19th century to the 20th and 21st century. You got a massive departure from the West. In other words, traditional Christianity. Yes. And so I don't think, I mean, in every way, the case is not made for Catholicism to be, I want to be a Western, the cultural pull and all that. Okay, you want to be a modern Christian,
right?
But it's a modern Christian. It's not a traditional Christian. It's not an ancient Christian in the West.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. It's a pre-modern Christianity, the pre-denominational Christianity, the Christianity that Christ's church that he established and was handed down. The faith.
Absolutely. The same yesterday, today, and forever.